Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. So, our old friend, John Kerry, former Secretary of State in the Obama administration, is back in the news. The way he's come back in the news is rather peculiar. The Iranian foreign minister, Javad Zarif, has taken part in an oral history project in Iran, during which he spoke for some 7 hours to a journalist and a historian in Iran. And as these things happen, parts of this very long conversation have been leaked. We don't know yet by whom, though we can speculate. They were leaked to an Iranian news site in London. I think it's called Iran International. In any case, there are a number of very interesting things that apparently Zarif said. Now, we have to add a caveat that we haven't heard the tapes, we haven't read the transcripts. All we have is excerpts that have appeared in media stories. So, Peter, I don't think you know Farsi. I certainly don't. So it's going to be a little difficult for us to ascertain.
I know in the past, things that have been said in Farsi have been grossly translated into English.
Right.
Okay. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But in any case, one interesting thing he said, which is going back to our subject, which is about John Kerry, said that John Kerry, at some point, we don't yet know exactly what it was during the time that Kerry was Secretary of State, maybe during the time that Trump was in office. At some point, Kerry had told him about the some 200 attacks that Israel had carried out against Iranian assets in Syria. Now, one would have thought that this can hardly be a surprise to Iran. I mean, everybody has known about
if it's your assets.
Exactly. Nonetheless, the way it's being presented in the media, as I say, we only have the media reports to go by. The way it's being presented, that Zarif was actually very surprised by Kerry's revelation. So, all right, that's one thing. We do know from the past that Kerry is wont to talk rather indiscreetly about his doings and the doings of the United States. We remember his discussion with Syrian opposition figures, during which he blurted out that the Obama administration has blurted out what we already knew. Basically, the Obama administration was egging on, encouraging, arming ISIS. He was doing it.
And he was caught on a hot mic admitting that the United States was breaking international law by involving itself into the international proxy war in Syria. So I mean,
that's what he's doing. Yeah, ISIS. What he was saying was that he was encouraging ISIS. That he was doing it, and with a view to using ISIS to topple Bashar al-Assad. It's something that we had known, but nonetheless, that was, he said it. He blurted this out to these Syrian opposition leaders. So this is the kind of thing that John Kerry does. And of course, the response among Republicans has been predictably furious. Kerry is stabbing Israel in the back. Kerry is, carrying water for Iran. It's kind of, the New York Times ran a story about this. This business of Kerry preoccupied only one sentence of this and seemed to express no view on this one way or the other, which is very striking because I'm sure most of our audience will remember back in 2017 when Sergei Lavrov visited Trump in the Oval Office, and Trump had allegedly told him something about Syrian anti-terrorist software that was being used on planes And there was an almighty. This was again leaked. This was leaked by somebody in the White House. Could only have been very few people involved, and no one ever found out who leaked this. But there was an almighty outrage in the United States, in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, that Trump, who after all is the president of the United States, leaked confidential, secret information to the Russians. He was betraying our ally Israel by leaking this to Lavrov.
The president of the United States, by definition of his power, can say anything he wants. He can declassify in a snap of a finger. He can say what he wants to say. It is his prerogative as president of the United States. No, they always leave that out. He can do it and unfortunately, he did declassify things, but his underlings never released it.
No, that's exactly right. It is entirely within his jurisdiction to reveal whatever secrets of the United States to whomever, because he is the president, and therefore he makes the ultimate decisions as to what is in the national interest of the United States. If he thinks that it is important to U.S. national interest to reveal this to Russia, then he's entitled to do so. Elections have consequences. He was elected. He had that. It was his prerogative. Nonetheless, we all remember the hysteria that didn't subside. I mean, it went on and on about how he disclosed secrets to and betrayed Israel to the Russians. So none of that is happening now from the New York Times in regard to Kerry. So that's that aspect of it, so predictable, partisan shuffling. Democrats, okay, we're good. No problem here. Republicans, our greatest ally in the world, our closest friend, whatever, is being betrayed. So
you can only, in Washington, the only thing that you can do to be called a traitor and betraying is Israel. It's always Israel. It's always Israel.
Right. So, well, one other aspect of this this leaked tape, again, we're only going by.
We haven't heard.
Yeah, is Zarif really didn't have much time for General Soleimani, who was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and who, remember, was assassinated beginning of last year. He complains that Soleimani tried to sabotage his policies. Zarif was really anxious to sign the JCPOA. Soleimani really wasn't that interested. Soleimani was much more preoccupied with fighting ISIS.
Yeah,
in Syria,
killing ISIS.
And ready to, he was ready to sacrifice the agreement in order to fight ISIS. But surprisingly, and this is which is news, Zarif seems to be very critical of the Russians. He thinks that the Russians and Soleimani were in on it together, because media stories had it that it was Soleimani who had persuaded the Russians to get involved in Syria in 2015. But Zarif said, no, it's not. It was actually the other way around. It was the Russians who leaned on Soleimani, and Soleimani then got very heavily involved in Syria. It certainly is surprising, to us as outside observers. We say bloody good thing too. Both that the Russians got involved and that Soleimani got involved and that ISIS was defeated jointly by Russia and Iran. So it's hard to see what exactly.
I don't care who was pushing it. I'm glad the results.
Anyway, take it away, Peter.
Well, first of all, John Kerry, he's kind of a lighter version of Joe Biden. I mean, he's gaffe prone. Okay, number one. Remarkably, when the microphone is hot, he has a tendency to say the truth, which is kind of embarrassing. Again, we didn't hear the recording. We don't speak Farsi, and I would be very, very particular about turning to a news organization or individual that would translate it, okay? Because there's so many people that want to twist the truth to fit their narrative, and because John Kerry is a pretty sloppy guy and he's not very smart, we have to be careful about it. The fact that he said something about Iran, Israel attacking Iranian assets. Well, I suppose the Iranians kind of patted John on the back, say, "Yeah, we know there are assets."
Well,
Okay.
one would think that's exactly what they. I mean, what's the secret? I mean, it's like, did anyone in the world, was anyone in the world unaware of what Israel had been doing for years in Syria?
Still doing in Syria.
Right. So it's strange for Zarif to be talking like this. I mean, unless there's some more to it than that, and that we haven't heard. But as things go, it just simply any casual reader of the newspapers would say the same thing.
Well, and also there's the whole Logan Act and John Kerry after he left the Obama administration. He made at least one, maybe two trips to Tehran, and of course people are accusing that. The Logan Act is something that is very arcane, and it's really difficult to prove. I mean, you have the First Amendment. I mean, after all, he was one of the architects of the deal, and he's talking to his interlocutors while it was still in play, because I don't think at that point Trump had walked. Yeah, he was there before Trump walked away from it. So, I mean, for me, nothing really sticks there. I mean, these are people that don't like John Kerry, don't like his current job in the current administration, and didn't like the Iran deal. I mean, it's a perfect storm just to go after him again. You and I are no big fans of John Kerry whatsoever. I thought he was mediocre and amazingly, I mean, he was great at being mediocre in every single way. Okay? Nothing stands out whatsoever. So I think this is looking for hay against. I mean, like I said, there's so many different angles. Betrayal of Israel. That's the only original sin these days. So I kind of cross that off as not meaning anything. The Iranians telling an American Secretary of State that their assets in Syria are being attacked. I cross that off. I don't really care. I wouldn't touch this standing on a ladder with an extension cord, because of translation issues, and because there's so many people that it's just like every day there's a barrage of stories of why not Trump, but now Biden shouldn't get out of Afghanistan. So now we're getting more stories about why the JCPOA should not be, the U.S. shouldn't reactivate it for its side. For me, this is just the fog of propaganda. It doesn't really mean anything. It didn't have, from what we can tell, had no concrete demonstrable policy impact. Right. Okay, the guy is blabbing. Okay, so what?
Well, I think so, but I do think that we have to look at who the source of the leak is. Now, I mean, Zarif is conducting this interview with an Iranian journalist and historian. It's an oral history project, and you have to then think that the source of the leak are the Iranian hardliners. I mean, who don't like the JCPOA. There's an election coming up later this year, and they want that whole Rouhani, JCPOA, Zarif crowd out. They don't like it. They think it's been a complete disaster for Iran to sign this agreement, that Iran was taken to the cleaners by the Americans. And I think they're the ones who leaked this out at the end, because it is embarrassing for Zarif. I mean, he's caught blabbing. I mean, he's always had a reputation of being a very smart guy, very discreet. He's now been caught really saying foolish things, because if we go by the media stories, he's saying about Russia. Russia is a good ally of Iran. Iran does not want to antagonize the Russians in any way. And and again, Soleimani is, he has almost mythical standing in Iran. So embarrassing for him. So you'd have to think it's internal enemies with Iran are responsible for this leak.
Well, again, here we go again. We have the worst of the neocons in Washington and in London joining forces with the war hawks in Iran. I mean, that is just one wonderful party, isn't it, George? They all find common cause. They need each other. They need the other to justify their own actions. Okay, so again, you bring up a very good point. I mean, who is this to discredit? Okay, and it looks like obviously and you know, you and I have discussed this before. They're like 60% in agreement, 80%, you know, this and that. We don't know. That's the
Right.
fog of diplomacy. And again, when particularly in these issues, that you have to be so very, very selective and careful when you look at these media reports. I mean, was this oral history? Were there questions being asked, or was he just rambling on with, you know, in front of a camera or a tape recorder? Was he prodded? Was he corrected? Was he directed? You know, there's a lot of things going. Is this an interpretation, or is this, how well does the person know Farsi to understand this? I mean, there's so many other things out there, but you hit the nail on the head here, is that it very, very likely is, and of course, there's, I think as we speak right now, or it was a couple of days ago, high-level Israeli delegation in Washington.
Right.
Okay, so there are never coincidences when there are things like this in play.
No, I agree. You know, there are no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. So to me, it looks like, you know, yet another nail in the coffin of the JCPOA. And I, you know, maybe I'll be wrong, and then tomorrow, you know, they'll say we've got an agreement signed. But it looks like there's just a, you know, for Iran having signed this big agreement with China, and now, you know, it's coming even closer toward Russia. You know, there's talk of that Russia is providing assistance, you know, providing convoys for Iranian tankers to supply Syria. If that's true, if that's confirmed, that, you know, Russia really is providing these as military convoys to defend Iranian tankers, then it does look like, you know, Iran is over the worst, and that the sanctions are really not as painful any longer as they were 2-3 years ago. In which case, what's the great incentive for them to go back into this agreement and then to be fooled again by the United States?
Yeah, I mean,
years down the road.
Absolutely. I mean, because maximum pressure means maximum leverage. No, it doesn't. The more pressure you put on there, the less you are leveraged. Okay, you can't hurt anymore. Other than ultimately an all-out war, which not only would, sure, Iran would lose, and so would the entire region. It would be in cinders, okay? So, I mean, again, Tony Blinken and those people, I don't know what they're thinking, okay? Their leverage is very limited. And of course, you bring up the internal dynamics of Iranian politics. They have an election cycle coming up. And, you know, they're saying, why do you want to go into negotiations? I mean, it's just the president of the United States. They seem to do things on whims, you know?
Right. No, that's right. And it's a kind of a strange, because we were talking about this, I don't know, I can't remember yesterday or maybe what exactly does Biden and Blinken want with Iran? Because it's just, it's, you know, why are they preoccupied with this, the JCPOA? I mean, you know, they're obsessed with that, while at the same time they're obsessed with getting rid of Bashar al-Assad and to squeeze Syria as much as, you know, cause as much pain as possible on Syria, and thus prevent Iran from provide just humanitarian aid to Syria. So they're doing that, and then they're trying to get on this JCPOA. I mean, what, you know, there doesn't seem any kind of coherence to any of this.
George, because Trump got out of it?
Right.
Or because Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing. Maybe Joe thinks, well, I'll get back into this and I'll get my prize. I mean, it could be just so hair crazy stupid as that, you know? I mean, these people are low octane thinkers.
Right.
You know, because I don't see any strategy at all.
Right. No, I think that it was certainly the case also with Obama. I mean, again, Obama, you know, was so eager to sign this agreement while he was desperate to thwart Iran in Syria. I mean, what was the point? So he's kind of antagonizing Saudi Arabia on the one hand by this, you know, by getting into this JCPOA,
and Israel,
while he's trying to support Saudi Arabia in toppling Bashar al-Assad. None of it just made any sense. But the Biden people are just continuing with it. It's like they haven't learned anything. Oh, great, that was Obama's policy. Let's just continue with what Obama was doing.
Yeah, it's very much like auto drive here. I mean, are they going to figure out things as they're doing it, which is kind of like fixing an airplane when you're flying it. But, I mean, we've seen a pretty rocky beginning here. I mean, they don't seem to have their bearings. I don't see any coherent vision outside of this ridiculous woke language, which I can't understand how that applies to foreign policy.
Right.
It doesn't, okay? As we've said before, I mean, if you have a woke foreign policy, why are you killing brown people all around the world? Doesn't make any sense, okay?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, we're going to keep an eye on this here because somebody's feeding this to the media for a political end, obviously, and we'll see who's good. I mean, I already, the neocons in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have already come out in those prestigious places like Politico, okay, which is such fluff, garbage what they write. But it's just for the political effect. So we'll see if it affects the negotiations that are 60 to 80% or whatever. But a very curious story from a very mediocre character, John Kerry.
Yes, that's right. So I think it is. I mean, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they haven't denied this story. They haven't denied this the leak that there exists this tape recording, and they haven't gone into the details of that Zarif didn't say that or anything like that. They just say, everything's out of context. It was a 7-hour tape recording. You're just taking out snippets, which isn't exactly an endorsement for Zarif. I mean, they're not saying, Zarif would never say anything like that. So just saying, well, you're just taking things out of context. So, but I don't know. This is kind of thing that Kerry does. I mean, Kerry sort of blabs. I'm surprised about Zarif. I thought he would be much too smart.
Let's be careful if it's
true. Absolutely, no, absolutely. I mean,
because I've been reading his stuff obviously for years. I mean, this is a person that understands the diplomatic craft.
Right.
Having him be flippant like that, like whoa. I mean, that's odd. I can't even think of a circumstance where.
Right.
I mean, people like that are very guarded all of the time.
Yeah. This is the way American politicians talk. They say they just blurt things out. About their closest allies, and then they have to do a quick. I'm sorry, I didn't really mean it. It was just a drunken conversation, or whatever. But
it was like Joe Biden saying, we're arming ISIS. Oh, and then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. I mean, just complete buffoons. These people.
Right. That's it.
Isn't it amazing how Obama just he was a magnet for mediocrity.
He really was. I mean, remember, his first Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton, which, and as we've discussed before, which was a total betrayal of everything that he had aspired to during his campaign. Well, I was against the Iraq War. I'm against stupid wars. So your first act is to appoint Hillary Clinton as your Secretary of State. So even after he does that, he gets his Nobel Peace Prize.
You know what the second appointment was after Hillary? A White House food taster. She's in the house.
Right. That's right. So again, I mean, it's like we're in this peculiar position. I think that as you said, there seems to be an alliance. Here, a confluence of interest between the Israel neoconservative lobby that wants to make sure no JCPOA ever, and the Iranian hardliners who also say no JCPOA ever. And I think this leaked recording.
Yeah, but what they're doing is they're muddying the waters, okay? Because now a member of the Obama administration, a current member of the Biden administration, have betrayed Israel and loose lips sink ships, and then they just want the news cycle to go on because they want to leave that the impression. Boom, we don't need to see the transcript. It's okay. We understand the gist of it. Okay, that's what they're going to do. Okay. Because even if this all thing comes out in 2 or 3 weeks' time, initial news reports, and these people never say they're sorry because they have no idea what they're talking about. because they're just trying to persuade you. They're trying to gaslight you. They're not interested in the story. Because, right. I mean, why would I waste my time on that? Okay, it's a cudgel. Okay.
Right. No, that's right, and that's why it's so striking. You know, how differently everyone is responding to when Trump apparently disclosed to Lavrov some Israeli gadget, and which was the greatest betrayal of of an ally, since who knows when.
They invented allies.
Yeah, exactly. Israel, our gallant fighter against global terror, has been sold out to the Russians. So
and history has never been the same.
That's right. And incidentally, in this case, though, John Kerry was not authorized to disclose secrets. So, even if he did disclose any secrets, he wasn't authorized to do so. I mean, whether he was Secretary of State or whether he was already out of office, it's not his call to disclose classified.
It wasn't a secret. Go to antonwar.com. Everybody knows. I mean, we can go there and figure out how many times Israel has struck Iranian assets in Syria in this calendar year. It's not hard to know.
No, it's a 200. It's like, the 200. I would have said only 200.
Only, I'd be too.
All right, Peter. We will, of course, maintain our customary laser-like focus on doings in the Middle East and on John Kerry, who doubtless will survive. So remember, we're on Rumble. Look us up there. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.